Lindsey, welcome. Now, Lindsey, you're a public school teacher?
I am, yeah, I teach in Providence, 3rd grade ESL.
Oh, beautiful. Thanks. And Representative Paiva is always recruiting.
Yes, so am I. So, good afternoon, members of the committee and the community.
You may take as much time as you need.
Thank you so much. I want to shout out to the bell room. There's a lot of folks in there holding it down, so it's been real. So my name is Lindsey Paiva. I am speaking in opposition to Bills 5688, 5859, 5738, and 5739. I'm a 3rd grade teacher of multilingual learners in Providence Public Schools, and I'm the 2022-23 Providence Teacher of the Year. I'm here. Thank you. I'm here today to speak as an advocate not only for educators, but also for students, parents, community members. Based on the vague and inconsistent language in these bills and the rhetoric that's used, it's abundantly clear that the sponsors have very little experience with current instructional, curricular, and discipline practices in schools in the state of Rhode Island. This is most likely because these bills are essentially copycat legislation that are taken from boilerplate language written by non-educators. This is another attempt, following many years of attempts by the bill's sponsors to import polarizing, undemocratic, and harmful policies and practices to Rhode Island from out of state. These bills are not aligned with Rhode Island values and do not support and protect students and parents. Legislation like this is popping up all over the country, spreading lies and misinformation about what is actually happening in schools today. Touting vague and misinformed language about parents' rights, these bills create a false dichotomy between educators and families and drive a wedge between two groups who frequently work closely together in collaboration to build the schools that our students deserve. I can speak from my own experience that I have a very close relationship with my families. There's extreme transparency in my classroom and in my school. There's an open door. Parents are in and out all the time. They know what we're learning. They know what we're working on. These bills are not about protecting parents' rights. They're about attacking the rights of queer, trans, undocumented, poor, and working class students, as well as students of color. We've already seen the effects of bills like these in Florida and other states. Teachers in Florida today who violate the provisions in laws just like these can face a 3rd-degree felony charge, which is 5 years in prison. This legislation criminalizes democratic teaching practices. If bills like these pass in Rhode Island overnight, our classrooms and schools will transform into unsafe spaces for students and teachers alike. Students will no longer be able to engage in authentic dialogue with one another or with their teachers, and educators could be fined or even imprisoned for cultivating critical thinking skills in their classrooms. Teaching is rewarding, if exhausting. Check it, I'm very tired. Which is now more than ever under fire from a small minority of folks who are looking to use fear, intimidation, and threats to limit teachers' ability to do our jobs. We are currently living in a nationwide teacher shortage. On any given day in Providence Public Schools, there can be up to 200 classrooms without an educator. The fear-mongering and intimidation created by proponents of bills like these is scaring pre-service educators away from the profession and is causing veteran teachers to quit. I'd like to draw the committee's attention to page 3, line 3 of Bill H5739, which states that teachers are, quote, prohibited from pursuing activism or advocating for specific political beliefs or candidates. Not only is this bill looking to limit what we can do inside the classroom, but it also seems to me from this language that it's trying to limit what we can do in our free time. Are educators not members of society, of our democracy? This is a blatant attempt to silence teachers and to take away our rights to be active and engaged citizens. As educators, we have a responsibility to do in our classrooms to cultivate democracy, to encourage intellectual debate and curiosity, and to support students to build critical thinking skills so they are able to analyze, critique, and understand the world around them while advocating for a more just future. Our classrooms are where we practice how we want to move in the world, where we can challenge one another to be our fullest, most authentic selves. It's here in classrooms where we can co-create brave spaces that push students and educators that are steeped in love and trust to speak our truths, to engage in active listening, and to affirm and uplift one another. Our job as teachers is to serve the public, and that means the whole entire public and all of our students. We cannot ignore and erase the experiences of entire communities of people because some people find those communities or those experiences uncomfortable. If we practiced having hard conversations in classrooms and we leaned into that discomfort a little bit, we would be better equipped as adults to engage our peers and colleagues and to call in lovingly, call in harmful rhetoric and actions, and to hold one another accountable for building the world that we all want and deserve. Teachers cannot do this critical work if we are silenced and threatened, if we are told to ignore our students' lived experiences and identities. These bills are also a distraction from the true needs and the crises in education today. Instead of advocating for what we actually need right now on the ground in schools, more resources, listen up y'all, more funding, more staff, and more supports for students and teachers, proponents of this legislation are more interested in creating false divisions and fostering misinformation and unfounded fears. Rhode Island educators will not let our communities be intimidated and bullied. We will connect with our families, friends, neighbors to interrupt misconceptions, defend the truth, and move together in solidarity toward a more just future. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
And it's my pleasure to introduce, last time he was here, he was a high school student. Now he's in college, and we're very pleased that he took some time out of his college life to come in and testify. Nathan Emily, right?
Yep. You
Welcome
guys,
back,
second
Nathan.
attempt. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Committee. I'm not even going to attempt to...
Is your button up?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not even going to attempt to top what she said. I will just say I had something written here, but I just am kind of in disbelief I have to talk about this again, because I was here for these exact same bills last year, different numbers because of different sessions, but these... I was given a comprehensive sex education in middle school, and quite frankly, those are positive. There have been studies done, I don't have them with me, but you could check them, that show that when kids are given sex education around late middle school, early high school, the rate of child abuse goes down, of child sexual abuse, because a child, when they learn when something is wrong, they can identify when something is wrong and fight back. And these are positive things. And something these bills don't acknowledge is sometimes parents, as horrible as it is, don't know what's best for a child. Sometimes a child-safe person is their teacher. And especially when it comes to queer kids with harmful families, sometimes a teacher is the only person they have to go to. And when this bill would force that teacher to tell their parents about that, that could subject that child to more abuse from their parents. And in the case of transgender children especially, I've told this story last year, but a friend of mine was incredibly close to taking his own life between middle school and high school because he was forced himself into the closet. Since then, because of these bills nationwide, bills like this and bills worse than this, I've had 2 more friends attempt their own life. And the audacity of someone who has admitted that they don't know what's going on in schools to pass these bills with no real, there is no basis for passing these other than hysteria that is made up. Let's just get it, it's made up hysteria, and this will harm children. And it has harmed children, and it's quite frankly laughable that it's even being heard. I yield my time.
Okay. Welcome. Please proceed.
Hi, my name is Christina Elgar. I use she, her pronouns. I am a lifelong resident of Rhode Island, a Warwick taxpayer, and I graduated from the Rhode Island public school system in 2015 in Warwick. So I have a semi-recent perspective on what goes on and what experiences are like. I need to support what these 2 have already said, absolutely everything they said, especially the aspects of these bills that would require educators to out their students to their family will kill students. They might already be self-harming and looking for help. They might end up, if they can't get the help, self-harming and even committing suicide. I was in a student group when I was in high school that saved at least 3 lives while I was there in 2 years, okay? This is just facts. People are queer because they are. Groups do not make them queer, they keep them alive. If a student is not out at home, but they're out at school, there's a reason. They don't feel safe if out at home. We need to protect this. The in-school suspension bill is too broad. Children of color will pay the price for this bill. A 2019 study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences analyzed data covering 32 million students at nearly 96,000 American schools in 2019. Black students were 3.5 times more likely to be disciplined with school arrests, and they were 2.8 times more likely to be expelled. This was 2019, it was national, we're a part of that country, it happened even here. It will continue to happen, Black and brown students will suffer. Do not broaden the terms of what a disruptive student is and how they need to be dealt with. My mother has been a foster parent my whole life. She has had over 100 kids in her home. Many of them come angry, and they don't know how to deal with their emotions because they have never seen positive expressions of emotions. Simply teaching them how to deal with their emotions and the things that they're going through transformed these kids like instantly, okay? We don't need in-school suspension. If kids are disruptive, we need to teach them self-esteem and coping mechanisms. Some of these bills also I'll read this. So Bill 5739, page 2, line 20, historical events and figures shall be discussed by first developing an understanding of the standards, customs, and traditions in use at the time of the historical event. In other words, wants us to justify people being racist and sexist and enslaving people and lynching them and everything else that comes with that. We cannot justify historical violence. Instructional materials shall not center on any race, ethnicity, gender, religion, or viewpoint, but all of our textbooks are frankly written from a white perspective already. Please do not pass this. Fear of intellectuals in schools is a tool of fascism. Do not pass these.
Thank you.
Maybe, I'm sorry, I don't have your name. Congratulations on being teacher.
Lindsey.
It's Lindsey Paiva.
Thank you for all of your work. Just out of some of the questions that have been heard tonight, my question, not for or against, just straightforward question. You as a teacher, you said you have you have education in psychology, what have you. How would you compare that to, say, a licensed psychologist? Where are you on that level?
In terms of like, sorry, is this on?
In terms of what a licensed psychologist might be able to do with a particular child in distress or having certain, issues in their life, where are you on that level? You say in education next to an actual psychologist, a licensed psychologist.
I mean, the training is different, so all teachers are provided with training in educational psychology, and so we have to do that to get our license. So we have an understanding of like child development. We have an understanding of, we have to take basic psychology courses. And I think it really varies teacher to teacher and district to district depending on the training that's available. So like, for example, I have pursued a lot of training in restorative practices, in trauma-informed teaching, and so I feel like I have some skills around those areas, right? Like if there is, if a child is in distress, I can usually use strategies to support them, but there is a referral process, so depending on the severity or the need, we work as a team to determine what the best next steps are. The training is different for a school-based psychologist. They are They also do a lot of educational testing, so they are focusing on a lot of the cognitive, but also the emotional. We also have social workers, we have guidance counselors, so everyone's training is a little bit different, and it functions differently at different levels, but we do collaborate as a team and have a process by which we examine like the student and their needs, and then we come up with a plan together. So like I might have the academic, and I might have more of the family history knowledge because my relationship with families, and I can bring that to the table. But typically we have like a team meeting where we would, I know I'm like going around your question, but just to give some more context of like what it looks like in schools today. If a child is in distress, I don't like unilaterally make a decision about what we do for them next. I usually will escalate it to the next level and meet with all of the folks who are specialized to make the best decision for that child. And it does vary by teacher, you know, depending on our training.
Could I ask you, how many children are in your school?
In my school, so I teach at Webster Ave Elementary. It's teeny tiny. We have about like 300, I think, we had about 400. Numbers are declining. I have 22 in my class. We have 14 teachers.
Thank you. And one last question, if
Sure.
I may. How many licensed psychologists are in your school?
We have one part-time licensed psychologist. We have one full-time social worker, which is an anomaly. We are special, and that is not normal. And we also have one full-time guidance counselor.
So in your opinion, what type of staffing, say with licensed psychologists, what would you say would be needed within that school to support 400 children?
Sure, at least one full-time psychologist.
One full-time
At
psychologist
least.
for 400
And
children?
the social worker and the guidance counselor. And I would argue, to be perfectly honest, at my school, we also have to contract with an outside provider because we don't have enough. With those 2.5 folks, we can't cover the caseload. So we have 2 outside counselors who come in and provide therapy and mental health counseling. And we have a waiting list of students. So I have 6 students in my class right now who are on the waiting list, who can't even be seen, and they need weekly counseling. And that's a very, very small school.
So it must be pretty difficult when these issues come up and how to handle them and
It
how
is.
to make sure that the child or children that come to you are properly supported.
Yeah, and I think that's why I'm saying I'd rather see us focus on bills that are amplifying, like increasing resources and putting more staff in schools rather than this sort of work, which is not supporting students and families.
I appreciate it. I'm sorry to ask so many questions, but
I'm fine. I'm down.
You believe that
That's why I'm here.
one psychologist would be able to support 400?
Are you asking like in my dream world? Or are you asking like what do I think is happening? Like I'd say bare bones will make it happen, but if it's my dream world, I want a psychologist on every floor of the school. Like I want 5 psychologists, I want 5 counselors, I want 5 guidance counselors. Like if I'm dreaming big, like we need it. I mean, we have 20 kids on the wait list, and those are just the kids who have been identified as like really, really needing it. I would argue that many more students my former students and my current students could use it, but I have to kind of pick and choose, which is also not okay.
And I promise you, I'm not
No, I'm
saying
done.
this to be wise, I'm just asking you a question.
Sure.
Do you believe a school would, say your school of 400 children, do you believe that school would ever reach having all of those certified psychologists, the numbers that you just mentioned? Do you think we'd ever reach those numbers? To
Not right
properly take
now
care
in
of the
this
children?
climate. I'm dreaming of that world and I'm gonna work to build it, but not yet, I don't think. I think we don't have the staff, like I said, like bills like these, the climate for teachers is pushing people out of the profession. And so the shortage it's already an issue, but it's gonna continue to be an issue because pre-service teachers are bailing. They're going to do other stuff because frankly, you don't get paid that much. It's super hard. And now we're under fire for all of these other pieces. We're already overworked and underpaid and, you know, so
I appreciate you answering my questions.
thank you so
Thank you
much.
very much.
Don't start my time. I want to
Oh, it's
sincerely
a
thank.
preamble.
I want to sincerely thank the reps on this committee that put out that statement. That was really fabulous. So thank you very much for doing it in opposition to this. And I just timed it and I didn't put that.
Okay, all right. Please proceed.
Thank you very much. I'm a parent, an educator, a former school therapist, and I oppose Representative Morgan's bills, which use nationally message-tested parental rights talking points, but are actually harmful parental intrusion bills. These bills are a shameful silencing and justification of the history and current reality of people who have traditionally faced oppression, namely people of color and queer people and trans people. They attempt to shut down conversations about Black history and the history of racism and discussion of gender identity and sexual orientation. And as we've heard, out kids who may need to confide in school personnel. The intentional vagueness and overwhelming censorship in these bills have caused chaos and uncertainty in other states, with teachers fearing being fired or jailed for truth-telling, and students being harassed without consequence. These bills send a message that white feelings are more important than Black lives, that the beliefs of homophobic and transphobic policymakers or parents are more important than the well-being of queer and trans kids. These bills are designed for an extremist takeover of our schools, not for legitimate parents' rights, and certainly not for our children. Learning accurate, sometimes uncomfortable information with a curriculum designed by experts is what most parents want and what kids should have in our public schools. As a parent of a non-binary young adult, I know these bills are harmful even if they're not passing. I see it with my kid every time this comes up in the news. The war on trans kids and gay kids and kids of color has consequences. That war is not welcome here. We will discuss and challenge racism. We will unapologetically say lesbian and gay and bi and queer and trans in schools and out. We will not allow a small group of parents or legislators to weaponize our schools with thinly disguised bigotry in the name of parents' rights. Thank you all so much.
We'll go right down the line. Mr. Parisi?
Thank you, Chair and committee members. The Rhode Island Federation of Teachers and Health Professionals opposes 5688 and 5739, and we have issues with 5738. 5739 is the most problematic bill. The whole approach is just wrong. It seeks to criminalize teacher decisions in selecting materials and lessons. We don't think we need the Attorney General overseeing curriculum here in the state of Rhode Island. To state the obvious, our social studies teachers are most at risk with prosecution or discipline if this legislation passed. The bill is exceptionally subjective that really puts our members at risk. So for all those reasons, we oppose it. Quite frankly, given the choice between more political and bureaucratic influence in teaching or more teacher autonomy, we're always on the teacher autonomy side. 5688 is also problematic. While we recognize the role parents have, we don't see the necessity of enumerating them, and sometimes when you enumerate them, you actually limit them as an aside. But there's some specific provisions in the bill that will really entangle teachers in the bureaucratic information requests that are going to be promoted should the legislation pass. On page 4 and page 5, there's language about teachers having to provide information, and we just foresee teacher time being taken away from classroom preparation and instruction and being dedicated to information requests, which are sometimes used as weapons, not as productive ways of getting things done. So for those and a lot of other reasons, we oppose those bills. On the in-school suspension bill, quite frankly, we saw it generally in a positive light. We didn't see it as enhancing discipline. We thought in-school suspension was an alternative to out-of-school suspension, and we'd rather not students who were suspended be out in the community unsupervised, not learning. So we did see some positives to that, and I want to recognize that. That being said, the bill's overly rigid and prescriptive. It talks about, specifying cubicles and things like that, which not really realistic. There's no resources attached to it, which is a huge issue anytime you mandate schools do something. And then finally, there's some language about pre-suspension testing of everyone. It's just problematic. So, the intent is, we're on board with the intent, but the details in that bill lead us not to be able to support that one as well. Thank you.
Thank you for hearing me. I am Mary Alice Smith from Newport. I am the parent of a queer child, and I have seen her struggle with the emotional difficulties of being accepted by her peers, being accepted by her family, and I find these bills horrific in their cruelty for their singling out queer and transgender kids, and for the total lack of sensitivity to minority kids in the state of Rhode Island, which has a lot of minority kids. I also want to share with you that I grew up in the Deep South. I saw the impacts of the residues of slavery. I grew up in apartheid in Georgia. Black people and white people did not mix, except as black people performed menial servitude for white people. What were we taught? We were taught Gone with the Wind and Uncle Remus. We were not taught the true impact of slavery. I think not to permit our children to come to an understanding of what our true history is to underestimate our strength as a nation and our ability as a people to recognize what our history is and to work to overcome what our past has left us to deal with today. We look at what Germany did after the Holocaust. We look at what South Africa did after their apartheid. We need to come to an understanding, not hide it as these current efforts to obliterate our history, really. Every time I come to the State House, I always make it a point to go in the archives and look at the document that Roger Williams and John Clark brought back from King George. It's this enormous thing. Did you have any idea that thing is like 18 feet long and it's deer skin, and it's how in the world they ever transported it, I don't know. But to me, Roger Williams and John Clark represent the best in our country. Of course, we have to recognize also what they did to the Narragansetts. But I think we have to recognize that Roger Williams suffered from religious persecution, and that's why we're here.
Thank you so much for your powerful testimonies. It really is very touching. But I have a question for Jim, thank you. Sorry, I'm so sorry. When these bills come up, I love to talk to teachers in my community to see what they're thinking and how they feel about it. And specifically the in-house suspension bill, I had a teacher tell me that she'll do anything to make sure her students don't get suspended because it feels to her like they're getting off the hook for a day. So I'm just curious, do you have any statistics on how often suspensions happen? And, we did recently get some information on the statistics of, different minorities and different children who is impacted by suspensions. So I'm just curious, how often do they happen? Do you know?
So I know I've seen a recent report from the ACLU. Unfortunately, that data was about 3 years old because, during the COVID period, there, it was tough to collect data that was meaningful. So I haven't seen anything, covering the last couple of years anyhow. I know that I know that it's ebbed and flowed in terms of what school districts can provide as alternatives. Focus rooms is a phrase that some of our districts used, where there'd be an in-house during the school day place where you send students who are being disruptive in the regular classroom environment. But that's not universal. So, that's something that we think has some merit. But again, it's an issue of resources, space to a degree, but more so staffing. That's prevented some school districts from having it, or some who've had it have actually had to pull back from it. And if there's some additional data on the in-school suspension side, I'd be glad to share it with you through the chair.
Representative Cotto, I know that the Rhode Island Department of Ed website has suspension data broken down to schools. It's not desegregated a lot in terms of groups, but that's available. But I know what jumped out at me at the ACLU paper and study was the suspension of kindergarten kids. I know. It's like, yeah, your son, yeah. I mean, what do you do in kindergarten?
I think the general public would be shocked to see what goes on in some of our
kindergarten kids,
K and
students.
first grade teachers.
Talk about not meeting the needs. But
okay, button is up. Thank you. Hi, my name is Zoe Armstrong. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the GSA coordinator at YouthPride Rhode Island, which means that I work to support gender and sexuality alliances in schools, middle school and high schools mostly, across the state. I work with incredible students, and I have the distinct pleasure of getting to hear all about their identities, their journeys as they're figuring out who they are and what's going on in their lives, and to restrict that in schools and to restrict students' ability to connect with supportive adults, I think, is just truly a travesty. I will be brief on this, as I believe all of the rest of the testimony that we've heard today has been extremely powerful, and there's not too much that I can add. But I will say I oppose this bill for a couple of reasons. First, and not least of all, being that the language is extremely vague and intentionally misleading, and that I believe it would actually achieve the exact opposite of what it claims to attempt to accomplish. I believe that restricting educators' ability to talk about historically accurate and culturally relevant content with their students will only further oppression and discrimination. It does absolutely nothing to prevent it. And additionally, like Lindsey said so eloquently, it just puts teachers at a tremendous amount of risk when it doesn't need to, and it puts teachers and parents against themselves when really we should all be working together to keep our kids happy and safe and let them know that they're all great and should have every right to be exactly who they are. Yeah, with that, I will yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Angel Lopez. I'm an unofficial advocate for Providence, and I attest that my biometric information is not for sale. I am here today to oppose House Bill 5688. As a knowledgeable and actively engaged resident on legislation regarding the capturing, selling, and trading of biometric information, this bill is presenting an unfair trade-off, which I am requesting all members of this committee to stop. Please
excuse
allow
me, what bill are you testifying on?
688.
Oh, Parents' Bill of Rights. Very good. I'm sorry. Please proceed.
Yep. Okay. So when I reflect on parent rights, 6, 7, and 8 on page 2, I can understand the instance where the law would prevent access to a medical record to protect an abused or mistreated child from the accused parent. I can also understand how a warrant issued by the court can also allow the seizure of a minor's DNA without parental consent. But in contrast, I'm not aware of any enacted state laws that prohibit a parent from accessing their own minor child's medical records, or that allows a person to capture, store, or share the blood or DNA of a minor child without the knowledgeable and informed consent of the parent. Also, The term clinical laboratory on Section D on page 4, it confirms to me that this bill is attempting to allow the DNA, blood, or biometric extraction of minors to occur inside and under the direction of school districts for the purpose of creating a record to be stored and shared. And these records, of which parental right number 6 states that the access may be denied to any parent via an application to a competent court. And I have read and carefully deciphered all the previous biometric bills introduced on the House and Senate floors, and the language in this bill leaves the door open to exploit the privacy shortfalls that prevented the bills from passage. I know because I stopped them. So in conclusion, House Bill 5688 is not a fair trade-off for the parental involvement and parental access to information regarding school curriculum, testing, or extracurricular activities detailed in the second section of this legislation. And all of those items in that section of the bill should already be happening in the schools or in the works of being implemented, and in no way should be funded by sharing the exclusive information of any student in the form of a face, retina, or fingerprint scan, voice, gait, or typing patterns, or DNA, which are all aspects of biometric information. So I ask all of you to hold on to this bill. I suggest you focus the attention on protecting the privacy of students by developing legislation that places students and parents as the primary beneficiaries. Thank you.
My name is Jamie Bova. I'm here from Newport, and I use she, her pronouns. And I am here to express strong opposition to Bills H 5688, 5739, and 5859. Bills like this that censor certain topics and histories from being taught and prevent our children from being their full selves and participating fully in the school are actively harmful. Denying, minimizing, and debating the value of our LGBTQ plus population increases depression and anxiety as well as risk of suicide for our youth. Legislation like this does not improve our children's education or their experience in school. It limits their learning while fostering an environment of fear and teaches children that hate is acceptable. LGBTQ plus history is not a threat to our children. Supporting trans kids and ensuring access to school activities for kids of all genders is not a threat to our children. BIPOC history is not a threat to our children. American history is BIPOC history, LGBTQ plus history, disabled history. It is a fact that we are a nation that was built by enslaved peoples, and we are a nation that has much to learn from our history and that we have consistently failed to learn from our history. Bills that aim to divide and diminish are a threat, both to our kids and to our entire educational system. It's a disgrace that we are even here having to consider these bills and fight back against this level of hate speech. We must swiftly and soundly condemn these bills and the ideologies they represent. They are rooted in white supremacy, homophobia, transphobia, and fascism. Instead of entertaining this hatred, we must instead work against gun violence to help our children actually be safer in schools, properly funding our schools, improving the access to health care, both for physical health, mental health, for our children, and ensure that all of our children are housed and fed. This is what our children need. They need to be taken care of and protected. They don't need hatred that's disguised as choice. And I just want to urge you all to condemn these bills and not allow them to move forward.
Thank you for your testimony.
Hello, my name is Kaz Bradley. I am a senior at Rocky Hill Country Day School, and even though it is a school night, I am out here testifying because this isn't something that should be up for debate. I'm here to testify in opposition of all three of these bills as a student, a reader, a writer, an artist, and a queer child of queer parents. The ambiguous wording of HB 5688 is a poor attempt at covering up the transphobic agenda that it is clearly serving. This is just a disguised Don't Say Gay bill that would ban books with representation of people like me and my family and anyone else of diverse backgrounds and keep them out of our classrooms simply because some people don't like the fact that we exist. As a trans person who enjoys reading diverse books, I can fully confirm that reading these books and having this education is not the reason why I am trans, but it is the reason why I am still alive and I'm able to testify in this room today. If I didn't have books in my classroom, which is what this bill aims to do, Bills like this in Florida, they have no books in their classrooms anymore. I would not be here. I had books that encouraged me to explore my identity and eventually be able to come out and live my life loudly, proudly, and openly transgender. This bill doesn't just attack books, it attacks the lives of LGBTQ students and teachers. I've spent my high school career fostering safe spaces and creating new safe spaces in my school. And the most important part of that is having a confidential agreement between the students and the faculty. By breaking confidentiality of school communications and records, queer students in unsupportive households face risks of abuse and homelessness. This bill would forcibly out students to their parents. Representatives, I ask you to listen to the people that this bill will affect, not the people who are proposing it. I would like you to listen to the people this bill will affect, because this isn't about your generation, it's about ours and it's about the generations that come after ours. And we're going to be here someday, and we want to be alive for it. I would also like to, I've got to pull this up on my phone because I wrote it on the way here, oppose 5379. I am very enthusiastic about learning history, as most of my friends would tell you. And this bill is just blocking history from being taught in classrooms. That's it. You're acting like kids don't get the history, or that the history is too messy or too painful for us to understand. And it's really not. Based on the writing of that bill, we understand that history better than the people who came up with that language, which I apologize for that, but we do. We also understand that the language in that bill is intended to be ambiguous to the point it's contradictory.
In conclusion.
Thank you. Sorry.
Okay, in conclusion, finish strong.
In conclusion, this bill is just a strong example of the phrase, history is written by the oppressors, and I don't want you to let that be the case.
Thank you, Chairperson McNamara and members of the committee. My name is Ryan Fontaine. I'm proud to testify on behalf of Thunder Mist Health Center in strong opposition to H5688, H5739, and H5859. Thunder Mist is a federally qualified community health center with locations in Woonsocket, West Warwick, and South County. Thunder Mist serves over 57,000 patients, that's 1 in 20 Rhode Islanders, with patients who come from every zip code in our state. In 2015, Thunder Mist became the first in Rhode Island to establish a dedicated program for trans health that now serves over 1,800 people. Thunder Mist has submitted written testimony already on these bills today. Speaking personally, I'm a lifelong Rhode Islander. I completed my primary education in Rhode Island and came back to my home state after college. By the time I had reached high school, I knew that I was transgender. The climate at my public high school was hostile to the very few students who were out. Fearful that the bullying I faced in the private school would follow me to my new high school, I didn't come out. In hindsight, I'm not sure if facing down the harassment would have been worse than delaying transition. Sadly, during a recent presentation to a group of students, they reported having to make similar choices today. Our students deserve to learn in a safe, healthy, and supportive environment. We've already seen how bills like these have harmed LGBTQ students in other states, and recent reports have shown that advocates for the policies in these bills include known extremist and hate groups from outside Rhode Island making calculated attacks on the LGBTQ community. Rhode Island was the second state in the U.S. to recognize that LGBTQ people should be treated with the same dignity and respect as everyone else. These proposals do not uphold that legacy and will do real harm to Rhode Island's young people. In conclusion,
please, yeah.
We urge you to reject these proposals.
Thank you. And it's Thunder Mist Health and Woonsocket. Do you have a contact number? I think people watching might say, or they can just look it up, Google it.
They can look it up. I do not know it offhand. I'm actually relatively new to Thunder Mist.
Okay. Well, I think people will just be pleased to know that those services exist. And also in West Warwick, okay.
And Wakefield.
Yeah,
And
West Warwick
Wakefield.
in South County.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is this correct?
Yes.
Sorry about that. Also, I apologize if I'm a little shaky. I'm recovering from surgery right now. My name is Newton Brophy. I am a former teaching artist and a member of the Trans Journalists Association, but I am coming in my own capacity as a resident of Cranston, Rhode Island. People have already testified to very specific line readings in the bill, which I'm really thankful for, so I can focus more on what connects me to this as someone who is a writer. The thrust of this bill, 5739, appears to be asserting that ideology is something that can be prevented in any pedagogy, but when you actually look at what ideology is, every single person has one. It's just the water that we swim in. It's actually much more beneficial for children or for anyone when you are teaching someone the basics of critical thinking, to teach people how to recognize from what ideology and subjectivities that people are writing or producing materials from. This is something I encounter in my work a lot because of the objectivity paradigm. You see it a lot in discussions of journalism, this idea of you can write from a neutral or unbiased or default position, but that's just not real. And that sort of belief ends up leading not to elimination of ideology, but a concealment of it, which is a lot more dangerous. It would be more beneficial to give children the tools to identify the different subjectivities that materials are coming from. But what that bill is actually doing is working within the author's ideology to try to codify it into law. And the important thing to note is that ideologies are not inherently counterfactual. It's a problem if they are counterfactual because we love facts, but there are things that can be truths and beliefs. Like, I believe that everyone is inherently equal just because they exist. That's a fact. I think a lot of people in here would agree that that's a fact, but that's also a belief, and it's a political belief, and that doesn't diminish the fact that it's a fact. There's nothing wrong with that. What is wrong is when we try to legislate ideology that is counterfactual into the law. Yeah, and then the other thing I'll say just about the Parental Bill of Rights is that there is this assumption that children shouldn't have their own autonomy. And I think people always picture children and minors as being little kindergartners that don't have an understanding of what's going on in the world. And I'm literally sitting next to someone who is in high school, like a senior, who is very articulate. So please don't pass these bills.
Thank you. A comment. I want to talk to Kaz, whose family I have known for a long time. And I want to say, take this opportunity. First of all, she buried the lead a little, they buried the lead a little bit. Kaz is a tremendous artist. Kaz is a tremendous older sibling. They add, and their whole family adds so much intellect and love and light to our community. And it is so brave to come up here and tell your story. And I'm so proud of you. And we are all so sad that you have to come and do that. And everyone to put yourselves in a place where you have to do that. But you can rest assured that we are not going to let those who come after you struggle any more than you have had to struggle. We are looking to make the world an easier place for youth, like many of you in the room, and like you, Kaz. And I am so grateful that we have a world with you in it, an East Greenwich without you, and a Rocky Hill without you, and a world without you. It would be so sad. And so we're glad that you're here, and we are going to do everything we can to make sure that it's easier for the folks that come after you. And I'm sorry I mess up. Everyone remind me when I mess up with the pronouns. I know I am bad when it's someone I know and I fall into a habit. Always remind me. Remind people. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Christina Jester. I used to be a 7th grade science teacher in Smithfield, Rhode Island, And I'm very concerned about Bill 5739 and want to share my story, which illustrates how there is already too much racism and too much power to punish teachers for speaking out against racism in Rhode Island. This year, my students were being both subtly and blatantly racist to a teacher. This caused a hostile work environment for this teacher, making it difficult for her to do her job. I went to administration, as did she, and nothing was done. I took it upon myself to address my class. 2 students' parents out of 85 complained to administration. The superintendent responded by placing me on paid leave for the remainder of the school year and non-renewed me for next school year. They claimed I brought my, quote, personal beliefs into the classroom and wasted time that should have been spent on science instead of teaching my students to treat teachers of a different race and culture the same as they would their white teachers. This illustrates the type of thing this bill would make even worse and move into progressive school districts who are trying to do the right thing. What I went through, I believe, is not something that isn't uncommon. However, when many people found out about this throughout the United States, they could not believe that it was happening in Rhode Island. It's been a difficult journey, and it's been hard to cope with what I've dealt with. But that's all I have to say. I yield the rest of my time.
My name is Bob O'Neill. I'm a board member of Aging with Pride, but I'm speaking on behalf of myself here. I oppose all of these bills for reasons already stated, and also because I don't believe in censorship, and that's exactly what these bills are. They're a not so subtle effort to control the school curriculums and to control which books children are allowed to read. These things are out of the playbook of the Nazi party. Hitler used this and Mussolini used this. I've read the history that they don't want you to learn, and I've read the books that they don't want the children to learn, and I know where this is going. I've lived some of this history that they don't want people to learn. And also, as far as outing the children to their parents, that's ridiculous. If your children doesn't want to come out to you, there's a reason for that. It's because he or she does not feel safe. And that's basically all I have to say.
Thank you very much.
Hi, good evening. My name is Jay Watts, and I'm a clinical social worker and the director of the Trans Health Program at Thunder Mist Health Center. I'm here to oppose 5688, 5859, and 5739. Earlier today, you all received an email from me containing an open letter to the State House leadership that was signed by close to 200 individuals and organizations about these bills and others that are not on the docket tonight. All of the bills noted in that letter are part of a wave of legislation sweeping the country targeting transgender youth. It is a very stressful time for the trans community. People are scared. I am a visible trans leader in the community and the director of the largest trans health program in the state. I'm getting questions almost daily from colleagues, from patients, from trans community members, asking me if Rhode Island is still a safe place to live. Now, I know in my heart that these bills do not reflect who we are as a state. And I know that there are a lot of good people here and in this room who will continue to protect and affirm the rights and dignity of LGBTQ Rhode Islanders. But there are other people here who don't know that. There is that trans young person somewhere trying to decide if it's going to be safe for them to come out at home. They don't know that. The moment that these bills were even introduced, harm was done to our community. These bills create confusion and fear about what will come next. Even if there is no chance that these bills will pass, it is important to understand that the damage has still been done. I strongly urge the committee to reject these bills swiftly and concisely. Make sure that the community knows that you support them, And I also encourage the people who have sponsored these bills to reconsider their support, knowing that the foundation of this legislation has come from groups outside of Rhode Island that we know are extremist hate groups. And that is not who we are as a state. And so I both encourage people to remove their support and for us to not linger and wait for a decision from this committee on this legislation. People need to know very quickly that their rights are being affirmed and protected. So thank you.
Yes. Thank you for that letter. It was very powerful, and there were a lot of names, so I can only imagine how many phone calls and emails and text messages you had to make. So thank you for doing that. It was really powerful.
Thank you. I just want to give credit to Ryan, to my team members who did a lot of that background work, and it's very much a group effort. So thank you.
Thank you all for your testimonies. It's now like 8:15, so I feel like everyone who's still here, we really want to thank you all because you've sat here for hours and spent your evening with us, so thank you.
Welcome.
Hi, I'm Isabel Guastella, she, her. I'm a senior at Rocky Hill School, and I will be testifying in opposition to Bill H5688. Bill 5688, among many things, is a thinly veiled attempt at invading queer students' privacy and keeping LGBTQ+ materials out of schools. The Parents' Bill of Rights is not being proposed in the name of safety, but instead is being proposed in the name of bigotry. If this act were to pass, students would be cheated out of a diverse and full education, but more importantly, the opportunity to find themselves and a community. Queer students facing unsupported parents at home who were able to find safety in educational and social spaces provided them in schools would no longer have that shelter. This isn't merely an inconvenience to them, it kills. Representatives, I want you to think of how it would feel to have to be a different person in your home. That is precisely why LGBTQ+ youth, especially trans and non-binary youth, are more likely to commit suicide or attempt suicide. As a gay Jewish woman, I spent most of my education feeling unrepresented. Chunks of history and literature were missing from my education because it was considered as less important or inappropriate. I cannot put enough emphasis on how frustrating this is. I've shed a lot of tears over it. I needed to seek these corners of history out myself. But the most beneficial period of my education was with teachers who included LGBTQ+ stories into their courses, who treated these histories as what they are. History, not queer history, separate from history with a capital H, history. It is not indoctrination. It is not unnecessary. That is when I learned the most and felt the most passionate. And it wasn't just beneficial for me, it was beneficial for me and my peers. All of a sudden, I saw large swaths of time and context once blank being filled in, and I saw myself and my friends saw themselves, and I saw people that were like me or not new or anomaly. I saw that for thousands and thousands of years, we had been there contributing, fighting. It is not selfish to want to see yourself or to want a full education.
Hi, my name is Dr. Michael Broder, and I'm a clinical psychologist, and I'm here to speak out against H5739. For numerous reasons, but I'll try to keep it brief. First, the bill states that an individual, by virtue of their race or sex, does not bear responsibility for actions committed in the past by other members of the same race or sex. As a white person living in 2023, I know that I personally didn't create the system of enslavement for Indigenous and Black folks and other marginalized communities, but the psychological research is clear that I certainly benefit from these systems today, and I still actively participate in them every time that I'm willing to acknowledge a racist idea and not doing the work to dismantle it. I also bear responsibility for the actions of my ancestors because I see the reverberations of that racist history living within me today. Another concern is found within the line, no individual is inherently racist, sexist, or oppressive, whether consciously or unconsciously, solely by virtue of his or her race or sex. Our brains naturally make shortcuts. Like when I say peanut butter, you may automatically think of the word jelly or other things, based on your learning and based on your neighborhoods and associations. Our brain needs to do this to make lightning fast associations to fill in the gaps. Research from the Kirwan Institute for the Study of Race and Ethnicity shows that we can only hold about 5 to 9 pieces of information in our brain at one period of time. Unfortunately, if I am not doing the work to uncover systemic racism around me and also racism and white supremacy ideas within me, then I'm also likely to kind of fill in those gaps with racist information and also misinformation and stereotypes. The good news is that actually negative implicit attitudes and racist ideas can also be changed and can be overridden with new information. The more that I learn about cultural strengths and representation of BIPOC groups, the more that I have anti-racist curricula that I can draw from, the more that I can change those associations. And this brings me to my last point. The bill also states that no exclusive focus or centering of curricula on the history, literature, current events, cultural contributions of individual identity groups shall be permitted. It also states that historical analysis requires all topics of sides to be presented and explored. For most of my education, the side that was presented the most was a white, Eurocentric way of thinking and operating within the world. Even in psychology, most psychological science tends to overrepresent white, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic societies. The acronym is called WEIRD, and there's a reason for that. This misses the many valued sources of information that I did not have access to, but now I am building access to through the work of those around me and also my own openness to learn more. I'm so grateful for the scholarship of BIPOC thought leaders and for so many leaders within the field that I continue to benefit from. And I want to acknowledge the work of the Association of Black Psychologists, the Asian American Psychological Association, and also Brown University Center for the Study of Slavery and the Tamaqua Museum.
In conclusion?
In conclusion, I'm moved by the hearing here today and seeing all of the acts of resistance against oppression that are happening right now. I'm hoping that this moment and other moments like this will be highlighted in future textbooks instead of having them whitewashed away and erased with legislation like H5739. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir, please
I must
state your
begin
name.
by thanking the chair and members of this committee for allowing me to speak on this important matter today. My name is Leonard Jefferson. My first name, Leonard, was given to me by my parents. One need not be a serious student of American history to know and understand that my last name, Jefferson, was given to my paternal ancestors just a few generations ago by the third president of the United States of America and slaveholder, Thomas Jefferson. My intention is to remind you all of the importance of seeking, speaking, and acting upon truth, as opposed to seeking, speaking, teaching, and especially acting upon falsehood and lies. It is painfully apparent that the intent of House Bill 5739 is nothing other than to prohibit teaching of truth in order to formally indoctrinate students, as opposed to properly educate them in the schools of this state, with the hope being that no one will dare to speak about the elephants in this bill. In the event that House Bill 5739 becomes law, it seems to me that it would be necessary for the representatives here today to present a bill to appropriately rename Rhode Island's Department of Education to what it will be in truth, the Rhode Island Department of Racist Indoctrination. In conclusion, truth is of utmost importance in all matters, and especially in the matter of properly preparing tomorrow's leaders. No truth, no justice. Lies and disinformation always pave the road to injustice, including the injustice suffered by all children for having their pure minds knowingly polluted and intentionally polluted by known falsehoods.
Thank you, Mr. Jefferson.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Lima, and I'm testifying today against H5739. I'm a member of the North Kingstown School Committee, but I'm speaking today, the views are my own and do not represent the views of the whole committee. I was talking with someone the other day about why conversations about race can be so fraught with tension, and they said to me, people are messy. So it stands to reason that conversations with people can be messy also. And you have to be willing to work through the mess to get to the person. You know, history can also be messy, but it can be inspiring and heartbreaking and so many other things. But you can't strip humanity away from the lessons. My cousin, Jill Van Leesten, who actually happens to be here, and her brother Michael John, just returned from a trip from Africa. One of the places she posted about while she was there was Goree Island and the door of no return. It was impossible to read about this and to see the pictures she took and not feel emotional. I had never heard of this place. I have 4 kids educated in the North Kingstown High School, ranging from the class of 2008 to the class of 2023, fingers crossed. None of them have learned about this either. They also haven't learned about the acts of joyful resistance from enslaved people, which are documented in diaries. Putting aside the fact that they should have, bills like the one in front of you today would forbid them from learning about these and other things. Tell me, how do you teach about slavery without mentioning oppression? These bills are an attempt to remove anything that might make people uncomfortable from our curriculum, while ignoring the fact that there are people who have lived and are living the very events that are being described. When you do not allow full and complete discussions around topics, you present sanitized topics with no context that do not allow for students to understand the full scope of past events. Do you want a generation of people whose only references to the Holocaust come from South Park? To say that books and instructional materials should not center any race, ethnicity, gender, or religion is laughable. They always have. And for the most part, it's been a white, straight Christian lens. Now that there's a push to broaden that to include a more diverse representation, we're seeing legislation designed to prevent that. All students need to see themselves represented in their curriculum. There are students in our schools right now who are afraid to exist because of their identity. They do not feel safe in their buildings because of who they are. There are students who are not participating fully in their classroom experiences because they do not want to draw attention to themselves. They already feel othered. This legislation would say that they are othered, but they are not. And they need to see LGBTQ plus people in their curriculum and in their history books and in front of them in their classrooms as teachers. And basically as just another part of the human experience, not something to be hidden away. Thank you.
Jennifer, thank you for both your advocacy, your testimony, and most importantly, stepping forward and putting your name on the ballot to run for school committee. We need more courageous people running for our school committees. No, don't applause, please.
Thank you so much, members of the committee, Chairman McNamara, for spending the time to listen to so many powerful stories today. I'm the president of BLM RI PAC, and we are in strong opposition of all pieces of legislation that is being heard today by Representative Morgan. The reason why we're having this conversation today is because we have a select group of individuals throughout this country that want to erase the harm that they have done to marginalized communities in this country. So in order to actually acknowledge the harm that was being done through redlining, through slavery, through discrimination, they don't want to talk about that. They would rather wash it away, like this bill is what it's intended to do. And so what we really need to look at is powerful legislation like Committee Member Rebecca Kislak's Equity Impact Statement, and it's relevant to this bill because it brings us to this moment. Right? In order for us to acknowledge the history of a building that we are sitting in today that, if you walk outside, has plantation on it still, right? We're going to need to make some serious efforts in our next generation to have that understanding of how we got to this place. And we can't do that if we take away the history of our state and of our country, because it's an opportunity to learn and grow and not look away. Thank you.
Okay. Good evening, committee. My name is Riley Shivers. I'm a board member of BLM RI PAC. I'm testifying in opposition of House Bill 5739. As a Black queer woman, I am not only testifying on behalf as an organization, but as an individual myself. This bill is a clear attempt at erasure of people's identities and history itself. This is evident that this bill attempts to come across as means to prevent discrimination, but anyone who reads full contents of this bill would know that this bill is discriminatory. The inclusion of statements like line C in the bill trying to distract from the nature of this piece of legislation, but the true intent of this bill is clear in lines 1 through 7, where it explicitly is suppressing and attempting to ban the use of crucial literature in the classroom. In summary, this bill is hypocritical in itself. On one hand, it tries to promote quality of education while effectively limiting the education, what educators can discuss and go over in the classroom. While I fully doubt that this bill has any chance of making it through this committee, I just want to stress how awful it is that all of these amazing and intelligent people have to take time out of their days to come here and testify against such a ludicrous, hate-filled bill. Thank you for your time.
Hello, my name is Zachary Pinto, and I'm the Vice President of BLM RI PAC. Like many before me, I'm here in opposition of House Bill 5739. Today, you have heard lots of testimony dissecting this bill, and it is no secret that at its core it's rooted in racism and homophobia, even if it is poorly disguised as being inclusive. So in the interest of saving time, I will not repeat what has been said about the bill, but I would like to point out the real-world applications that this very bill would have. I'm a senior at Shea High School in Pawtucket.
Extra points for mentioning Shea. Go Raiders.
Yes.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Chairman. And in 3 of my classes today alone, discussions would not be possible if this bill was passed. In my AP English class, we were reading The Awakening by Kate Chopin and discussing the oppression of women throughout history. In my psychology class, we were breaking down personality types and gender studies. And in my theater class, we were discussing implicit biases and how it affects student-educator dynamics. If Patricia Morgan's bill was law, these discussions in classes would not have happened. And I want to stress the point that no one in these classes felt hurt or upset by addressing these issues. No one was treated unfairly by bringing up privilege they may or may not have. All that happened was the true goal of education, discussion and the spreading of knowledge. So in conclusion, there are 2 points I want to emphasize. If Black and queer kids can live it, then white and straight kids can learn about it. Please leave educating to real educators and do not let this bill see the light of day. Thank you all.
Hello, my name is Nicole Tingle. I reside in Warwick, Rhode Island, born and raised Rhode Islander. I am also serving as first vice president of the NAACP Providence Branch. However, I am here as an individual to testify in opposition of 5739. And my reasoning is due to the fact that, from my understanding, this will prevent the use of instruction of diverse cultures and history in the Rhode Island school system, including higher education institutions. It is disheartening to me to know that there's a movement for legislators across our country and now in the state of Rhode Island that are attempting to further implement and maintain suppressive educational practices through policies that aim to restrict accurate tellings of historical events and historical truth-telling in Rhode Island's education system. And as a Black woman who grew up in Rhode Island and completed K through 12 in public schools in Providence and East Providence, graduated 2009, I can attest to the fact that diverse cultures and historical teachings were very limited at the time, and would argue that it has been limited as a tool for generations to ensure that diverse marginalized communities are disempowered. Learning and unpacking our historical truths, the good, bad, and ugly, helps us to all heal together. Learning about diverse cultures helps us to understand how to engage with others and embrace diversity. It strengthens our connectedness to others, humans. In short, I ask that you oppose H5739. We must know about our past in order to understand our present and build a better future. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Carissa Koski, and I'm a resident of West Warwick, Rhode Island. I'm testifying in opposition to Representative Morgan's bills. Education and curriculum that aims to teach our complicated but important history is not discrimination. It is natural to feel discomfort when discussing the oppression of others and ourselves. But this is how we as a society gain a worldview that includes empathy and understanding, which feels like something that we are sorely lacking at this time. Discomfort is a difficult but important part of critical thinking and the learning process. Rhode Island students deserve to see accurate and diverse history, including the many viewpoints and identities reflected in what they are taught at school. This is a dangerous bill that is rooted in white fragility and the inability to accept our complicated past and present. I urge you to not allow the Rhode Island laws to dictate what teachers can teach and say in the classroom. Educators must maintain the ability to teach about important topics without censorship from people who disagree with the content based on anti-LGBTQ ideologies, fear-mongering, and religious extremism. Personal beliefs and values that undermine the reality and identity of others cannot be enforced in our public schools. Denying rights, history, and identity of others in school is dangerous, and it just furthers the political divide that we're seeing today. I also want to say that I'm really heartened by the showing of the LGBTQ community today, and feel a lot of strength in our community, and thank everyone for testifying today. Thank you for your consideration.
Hi, my name is Gianna Pacheco, and I'm here today representing the Rhode Island Now Board and myself, and I want to say we stand in firm opposition to House Bills 5688, 5739, and 5859. Now is committed to educational efforts that ensure the right of LGBTQIA individuals to live their lives with dignity and security, and also to address the barriers to equality and justice imposed by structural racism. These bills and questions claim to be establishing parental rights, which is meant to sound like a reasonable proposal, but to anyone who still might be sympathizing with these bills, ask yourself the right to what exactly? The underlying language of these bills is meant to allow people to bully teachers, harm queer and trans kids, and ignore racism. These bills would give license to discriminate against already marginalized groups who must constantly come to this building at 8 o'clock at night asking you to treat them with respect. Parents already do have rights when it comes to their children's education, but no one should have the right to pressure teachers into ignoring the lived experiences of other students, nor the right to infringe on the education of other students and parents who are eager to learn facts about history and the modern world. That's what school is for. These bills are written intentionally broad and with specific language, so they seem like a sensible idea, but with the underlying purpose of seizing control of what schools are allowed to teach. This is part of a widespread effort taking place throughout the country to target LGBTQ+ identities and racial inequality by prohibiting them from being mentioned or acknowledged. But this country, and especially this state where we live, cannot allow our education system to obscure these truths. Our country is enriched by diversity. And though we take pride in our history, we also have a dark and tragic past that we must reckon with at the same time. School is meant to prepare its students for the world. Children are going to grow up into adults. They are going to learn about the world one way or another. Let's not encourage a society that suppresses freedom of knowledge or freedom of self-expression. Instead, invest in schools, invest in teachers, and invest in the education of our youth. Or else in about 20, 30 years or so, we are going to have another generation of adults running for office and writing legislation aimed at erasing marginalized communities. That's all I have. We have some written testimony as well, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hello, yes. Thank you, Chairman McNamara and members of the committee. My name's Simon Olson. I am a lifelong Rhode Islander. I was born and raised in South County. I've lived all over, worked all over. I now live in Cranston. I'm here because I oppose H5859, H5688, H5739 for so many reasons. I think people have said really articulate things already. So what I just wanted to touch upon was bring up some local relevant history that I think we can learn from in this moment. I wanted to bring up the story of Prudence Crandall, who was born in the early 1800s in Hopkinton, Rhode Island. And in the 1830s, she opened what was effectively the first integrated school in, I think it was northern Connecticut, but close to southern Rhode Island. And I think we celebrate her for making an integrated school, opening the doors in that time when people weren't doing that, and we celebrate that. But the other side of the history is the response from the local families and the local parents who were vehemently opposed to her trying to integrate education. What happened at that time was that these white parents They threatened her, they threatened the school, they vandalized the school, and they eventually burned the school down. And we have to remember that it wasn't outside agitators that came and threatened her, vandalized the school, ended up closing the school. It was the parents. It was angry white parents who didn't trust her, who didn't trust that progress was moving in the right way. And the parents were not on the right side of history, right? I think that the point of that is that we just need to really trust educators. We need to strengthen the support that we give them. Parents have rights, they don't need extra rights. We're at this moment where teachers really need that. I also think that these bills just do not represent the priorities of Rhode Island citizens. Like other people have said, it's a coordinated effort to attack public schools, attack public school educators, and I really just urge all of you to be on the right side of history. Look into the past. We've done this kind of stuff before, and we need to not repeat it. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Volta Tran. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee. Thank you, everyone who's making this happen. It is incredible you are here this evening. We've heard a lot about the dangers and the implications of dangerous bills that these copycat bills from outside agitators are presenting. I want to talk about how public schools saved me. I grew up in a hostile household that was not accepting of someone like me. I am also surprised, Chairman. And in addition to that, I'm also a survivor of childhood abuse. I'm also a survivor of childhood sexual violence. And when I was 13 years old, I learned about the murder of who we now know as the 15-year-old Letitia King. When Letitia King asked a 14-year-old boy to be her Valentine, 2 days later, he brought a gun and murdered her. I was 13 years old when that happened, and it scarred me. It showed me that it didn't matter what I was learning in classrooms. Life already taught me this lesson. Someone like me should not be here. Like many outcasts, I found solace in the classroom of a lesbian English teacher. I asked her for the recommendations of diverse authors. She offered me authors like Maxine Hong Kingston, Toni Morrison, and James Baldwin. From Toni Morrison, I learned that you can survive sexual violence and have a future. From James Baldwin, I learned that you can be not white and not straight, and you can be in a country that you know may not love you back and still have a future. I urge you to all remember that public school is a way that we can equalize what students can learn when at home. There's so much to lose. If someone like Toni Morrison, a black woman, or James Baldwin, a black gay man, can be introduced to me by a white lesbian English teacher, lover, and that I, as an Asian American trans woman, can be here today, I think that's a victory. And I think we need to remember that's what's at stake here. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Shirley Francis Fraser. I am a resident of Providence, Rhode Island. I also serve as the second vice president of the NAACP, but I am here this evening as an individual, one who lives in the 4th district of Rhode Island. There's been many articulate statements made in opposition of this bill. And in fact, I oppose all of these bills. I'm here tonight to speak about H5739. It is unfortunate that this bill purports to support civil rights and even quotes the Civil Rights Act of 1964. But once you get to the 3rd page, first sentence, it just sticks right there. It shows you that it certainly does not uphold civil rights in any way, shape, or means. So we certainly want you to know that we should not support this bill for that fact. But there are many reasons that we should not support it. First of all, the fact that it comes in a beguiling way, the fact that one has to pretend, oh, it's supportive when it is not. That is telling right there. But then, of course, we have to look at the words of Dr. Martin Luther King, the author of Civil Rights, who states, what we need is not a history of select race or nations, but a history of the world void of national bias, race hate, and religious prejudice. This is what America is built on: diversity. Diversity, and we are in fact known as the great melting pot. And for years, unfortunately, many of the ingredients that cultivate African American culture, West Indian culture, transgendered culture, has been missing. And in order to make America the true great melting pot it's supposed to be, we must include those other ingredients to make it the fine gumbo it must be. Project 1619 promotes Dr. King's philosophy of an inclusive history. It's a very thorough examination through the lens of race and culture and civil rights, that the lives of all Americans have historically been impacted and must be looked at, learned, and discussed so that we can heal. So in conclusion,
it's good.
I ask that you oppose this bill and do not let it see the light of day. Kill it in this committee. Thank you.
Hi, hello, members of the House Committee. My name is Cal Loisel, and I am speaking in opposition to bills H5688, 5859, 5738, and 5739. I am a queer and non-binary community member and also a mental health worker at a therapeutic school for children and adolescents, where the big focus of the learning is about social emotional learning. And I am also a graduate of Cranston Public Schools and Rhode Island College, where I received a bachelor's in youth development. And I have a sibling in the middle school in Cranston. So the language of these bills is vague and will cause harm to children and families by spreading misinformation. The state of Rhode Island has a duty to provide students with accurate and inclusive education. The underlying goal of these bills is to attack the rights of queer, trans, undocumented, poor, and working class students, and Black and brown students, as well as other students of color, and as evidenced by similar bills that have already been passed in Florida and other states. Students and teachers have the right to feel safe and supported in school, and punishing them for utilizing critical thinking skills is not the way to support their growth. Bill H5739 attempts to limit what teachers are allowed to do inside and outside the classroom, which infringes on their rights as citizens to engage in society. If we ban students and teachers from discussing accurate history and experiences of all communities, we are setting ourselves up to repeat atrocities of the past. For example, the banning of books and subjects that is happening in other states is not dissimilar to the acts of Hitler's regime. This silencing has a direct negative effect on the mental health and physical safety of students and teachers. Bill H5688 is specifically vague in that it applies to any institution in Rhode Island, schools, healthcare, and mental health care. This further endangers Rhode Islanders' access to affirming and life-saving education and care. These bills will interfere with educators, medical providers, mental health providers, and other vital workers and others' vital work of addressing the needs of children. For all these reasons, I strongly oppose all of these bills. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Dr. Catherine Vieira Baker. I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm also part of the governance of the psychological associations. I am here speaking on my own behalf. But like you, Mr. Chairman, I spend my day in an alternative school setting as a clinical psychologist and traveling around school districts in Massachusetts. And I wanted to just begin my testimony first and foremost by answering your question, is that the National Association of School Psychologists recommends 500 students to 1 school psychologist. And in the state of Rhode Island, I have been told that clinical psychologists cannot be hired. You need to have a school psychologist, even though I'm licensed PhD and I am licensed as a clinical psychologist. So that's an aside. I also want to go ahead and begin with some of your opening remarks. I went and put some online testimony, so feel free to read that at your leisure. But I really wanted to emphasize that the beginning of this meeting several hours ago, Mr. Chairman, you outlined that we need to not infringe on other people's First Amendment rights, that we need to be empathetic and understanding of others, that we need to respect our mutual humanity, and that we need to engage in civil discourse because that is part of this democracy. These bills shut that all down. And I just also, because I work with kids, am about visual aids. I don't know, there are several of you who remember these. Even the dog is white. And I yield my time.
Wow, great finish.
Thank you for that
Representative Rio.
information. I did not know that. But to follow up, I have to ask you, do you believe 500 children for 1 psychologist
I'm
is enough?
sorry, no, I do not
It's an honest question. I don't know
Oh,
why
I
you're
know
laughing.
it's an honest question, but those numbers, especially when I see what's happening in schools today, I absolutely do not believe that's adequate. That's
thank
the standard that they have. I don't think it has been revised lately, particularly in COVID. And all I know is that the wait list for private practitioners is long. The wait list for trying to get evaluations for social emotional disabilities is long, even though there are mandates of when you have to respond. It's just outrageous. And here you have bills that will squash efforts to go ahead and tackle mental health and social emotional learning in the classroom because of values. Well, guess what? When you treat someone with respect, you are teaching values.
Hi, my name is Libby Merrill, and Chair McNamara and esteemed members of the Education Committee. Thank you, Chair McNamara. Your facial expressions have been quite entertaining. Thank you. So a lot of what I prepared to say tonight, so I'm here to testify in opposition to 5688, 5859, and 5739, and a lot of what I prepared to say has been said in one way or another, so I'm gonna try not to repeat as much as I can. But I'm a parent of a child who attends public schools in Rhode Island, and I can say part of the, I think someone else used the word obfuscation. Part of what is insidious about the Parents' Bill of Rights bills is that it restates rights that parents already have and hides with hidden intent. So parents already have the right to enroll their children in any school they choose. They already have the right to ask for permission for academic records, medical records. It's required that MCAS scores are sent home, that graduation requirements are sent home. It's required schools inform parents about about special education programs. So all of that's already required. We don't need another law for that. So at very least, these bills are useless, and at worst, they are harmful to all youth, really, to LGBTQIA plus youth specifically. I think the intent of the Parents' Bill of Rights is to give rights to parents while taking away rights from minors and from LGBTQIA plus minors specifically. And so I think that's part of the intent there. Also, there's a provision in there that would fine medical professionals at school for giving medical treatment without written parental consent. What does that mean? Does that mean a nurse could be fined $1,000 for giving an EpiPen to a child who's in the middle of an allergic reaction? I can't imagine. That's like very, very vague and very dangerous. So I wanted to say all of that. And then also, as a parent, it is not my job as a parent to indoctrinate my child with my worldview. So I don't get to have full control over everything my child thinks, and I shouldn't. That's not the role of a parent. Education and parenting is raising children to live in the world we live in, and that includes a world with people who don't think like them and don't share their values. And that's part of the purpose of education. It's to bring people together into like a communal commons to learn together. So my goal as a parent is not to raise my child to think exactly as I do. I don't have the resources to educate my child on most things, and I was a teacher for a long time, but especially not on worldviews that I haven't personally experienced. So my child needs public education. I myself did not grow up queer or trans, so I don't have firsthand experience on that experience, but I did grow up in a religiously conservative household where there was no sex ed taught in the home, and my only access to sex ed was at school. And so in conclusion, I had some things to say about 5739 too. In conclusion, I want my child to have a better education than I did, and that includes comprehensive sex ed, and that includes accurate history that is representative of all of her peers, not just her experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman and Committee. My name is Anita Bruno, and I'm here in opposition of Bill 5739. If I was aware of all the other bills, I'd probably be here in opposition of them as well, which goes to show the significance of the education system providing information for our students to be aware of bills like this. And if you stifle the teachers' voices, and if you stifle the administration and the educators' voices, there will be a lot more bills that go by and a lot more information that goes by that people aren't aware of. And that provides a disadvantage to our students, and it provides a disadvantage to our community to have a voice, to be community advocates. And we talked about good governance earlier and collaborative governance in one of the bills from CCRI. I've actually heard students and teachers alike talk about that, a whole democratic system where everybody's included, parents, teachers, and students, to run a more inclusive school system where everybody's voices are heard and everybody's included. And I think that this kind of bill suppresses all of that and suppresses the work that these people are trying to do. Another point that is real poignant to me, when we're talking about the Civil Rights Act, and we're talking about inclusion. Diversity, equity, inclusion is a real fad right now, right? But there are people that have lived experiences. And I know we talk a lot about slavery being 400 years ago, but there's people that we know that lived Jim Crow, that lived and fought and watched Ku Klux Klan and had throw rocks at them. I was at a CBTU meeting, Coalition of Black Trade Unionists, where a gentleman was saying that as a child he would throw rocks at the Klan and then run, right, because they were afraid of the repercussions. But there's people with these lived experiences today, right now, still alive. So it wasn't so far gone. So not being able to introduce especially Black history and curriculum that addresses culture and race as a whole continues biases. It continues the perpetuation of one race thinking they're superior to another. We have to include all education and all history for everybody to know the good, the bad, and the ugly. If we do not, we will not be a better nation for it. Thank you.
My name is Osmond Weeks. I'm a Rhode Island resident. I really wasn't prepared to speak today, but what happened was I heard about this late, and then I couldn't let it go because, you know, as a person of color and an immigrant, I didn't learn too much about my history growing up. I was educated in London, England, and I really didn't learn virtually nothing about my history growing up. So, you know, it's important that I had a college lecturer that told me about books in the library, and someone's brought it up today about James Baldwin. And I went to the library and I found a book that was written by a Black man, but he wasn't from England, he was from America, you know. And then James Baldwin, in one of the things that I read, said that he could not achieve literally, I mean, you know, he couldn't write freely and express himself in his own country, so he had to move to Europe to write these books so he could express himself freely and that people would not censor his books. So on another term, when I came to America, knowing pretty much nothing about my history, I started learning because, you know, in America, they talk a lot about history, about what happened in the past. You know, we've seen the movies that people made, like Roots, to educate us about what happened in the past, the things, the atrocities, and also, you know, the lives of the people who were affected by slavery and what they went through. And for me, not knowing anything, you know, I'm totally interested, I'm learning, you know. So for me, that when people try to pass bills like this, you know, you're stifling this country's growth, you're stifling what you give to the children. You shouldn't restrict this knowledge. This knowledge should be shared. We should all know it. We should all know it because they say if you don't learn from the past, you're deemed to repeat it in the future. So we don't need to repeat this because, you know, it was a bad time in this country's history. It was a bad time for people like myself. Now, we all know this, and we don't want to repeat it, so we need to teach it. It needs to be taught. It doesn't need to be swept away. And nobody should feel guilty because, you know, this stuff happened many, many years ago, but we still need to know. And we're not trying to traumatize anybody or try to give them complexes, but, you know, you shouldn't censor the history. History has been made, and now it should be taught. And that's why I came here today, because I wanted to
Thank you.
step up.
Are there any questions?
I do not suspect these bills will move forward. However, in a scenario where a local school committee decides to adopt 1 or 3 of these bills as a local ordinance, whether you are a parent or you are an adult with a loved one who is attending a K-12 public school, if a local ordinance related to one of these 3 bills was adopted, would you consider sending your child to another school district and or advising a loved one that they switch their child over to another school district based on the impact of these bills?
If we could just do this like the lightning round? Yes,
Yeah,
no.
yes or no would be sufficient. A yes or no would be sufficient.
Please.
And anecdotal.
Quickly.
I'm sorry, I'm not going to answer that in a quick yes or no. What I was going to say is I don't get to dictate everything my child learns, and schools are open to learning. Our schools are open to conversation. So another important thing is parents can reach out to schools directly, and I do. So my child is only in kindergarten, and I've already many times reached out to our school. So my answer is no, I would not move my child out of our schools if they adopted one of these local ordinances, because I believe in investing in my community's public schools. I would work within the structure to try to make the school system better. And by reaching out to the principal and the superintendent, which I have already done, when, for example, we're having spirit days that are insensitive of certain cultures or culturally appropriative, I reach out. The principal is very receptive. I would continue to do that.
That's a very interesting question, Rep. Morales. So, I'm sorry, it's hard to do a yes or no. We heard a bill today about school choice. School choice in Boston has allowed the desegregation of schools. Most of our kids of color are pooled into these failing school systems. With that being said, I moved out of Providence into a suburb to give my son a better option and a better opportunity to get a quality education because I can't afford to put him in a private school. With that being said, I've been at the superintendent's office numerous times to tell her and ask her to implement anti-racial training. And I asked her to do it annually, and well, actually I asked to do it quarterly, and she told me we can't afford that, but we can promise to do it annually. A year and change went by, and my son experienced more microaggressions, so I had to address it again. And I asked her again, and her response to me was, well, I never received your email for the organization that you suggested. I said, well, you're the superintendent of schools. You shouldn't have to wait for my email. But I did send in the email a week after the first time we met. And I forwarded her that email that I introduced. So to this day, she still hasn't done that.
Wow.
Now, when I first moved from one side of Situate to another, I had to ask the superintendent's permission for my son to stay in the school he was because I didn't want to transfer him yet to finish that elementary. So right now, school choice is not a thing. Unless you ask the school district and the superintendent and get permission to switch your kid from one district to another, you cannot. It's illegal in Rhode Island. So I couldn't, even if I wanted to.
I think that's a no. Sir? All right.
It's very hard to tell. Hi, my name is Sid Loisel. I use they, them pronouns. I'm a licensed independent clinical social worker here in Rhode Island, and I work at a large pediatric gender clinic here in Providence. And I think I wrote stuff, and I'm not going to read any of that because it's already been said, and I'm grateful for that. I think I just wanted to point out, first of all, like, I'm exhausted. This was exhausting. Thinking about this for the past week was exhausting. And I am an adult with coping skills and support and this lovely group of people behind me who I can coordinate with. And that's not the same for all of our young people. And so I just worry about them knowing that this is going on and not really knowing what's happening and how they can be a part of it. And I think I just want to point out that, you know, we've talked a lot about like negative history and things that suck being erased. But when we erase that, we also erase a lot of the joy of the history and the positives and being able to learn about the good things that come out of Black, queer, trans people in our history and currently. And so I think, you know, we are adults, but we can still learn. And so every day this is one of my lovely coworkers, and she hears me say all the time, I think, every time I meet a kid, I'm like, oh my God, I love them. Like, they're adorable. They're so great. And I have so much joy working with young people, and I'm sure all of you can relate to that, being educators or adjacent to educators. And so I think let's just keep that in mind and remember how much faith that we can put in our students and in our teachers and not try to censor that. So I oppose the bills, all of them. Thank you.
My name's Emily Allen. I'm an adolescent medicine physician. I'm testifying on behalf of the Rhode Island chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics, and I do work with Sid, and our patients are the greatest and the most inspiring people that, we get to work with. I am testifying in opposition to House Bill 5688, and we also oppose House Bill 5739. As pediatricians, we know that strong parent-child relationships are the foundation of child health and well-being. In my work as an adolescent medicine physician, I see the profound positive impact of parental involvement, love, and support as adolescents are developing their sense of selves and their independence. And I also see the ways in which school environments directly impact my patients' health and well-being. The sense of belonging that comes with being on a team, the positive identity development when students see themselves reflected in curricula, or how bullying can lead to anxiety, depression, and suicidality. Research has shown that school and family connectedness during adolescence is linked to reductions in poor health outcomes in adulthood. So as pediatricians, we strongly support meaningful partnerships between parents, schools, and youth. These bills, however, as we've heard tonight, do not actually promote effective collaboration between parents and schools or healthy parent-child relationships. They are overly broad and vague and would create confusion and barriers to both education and healthcare for children. They would make it difficult for teachers to respond to anti-LGBTQ and racist bullying and to teach appropriate and accurate health education. We want to highlight a particular area of concern in House Bill 5688 that indicates that no healthcare providers would be able to provide any care to a child without written parental consent. Informed consent is a collaborative process that allows patients, parents, and medical providers to make decisions together. In the context of a health visit, many topics, each requiring their own treatment plan, may be discussed and implemented. The language in this bill, again, is vague and confusing and would have the effect of restricting healthcare for youth. Requiring written consent for all care is unprecedented, impractical, and misguided. It's also unsafe. So in conclusion, House Bill 5688 would be detrimental to the health and well-being of children and families in Rhode Island, and we urge you to oppose these toxic bills. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Okay, it's working. Hi, my name is Samantha Richter, and I'm also in opposition to this for several reasons. One of it just being the highly possessive language of the bill, the way that it talks about children as if they're an appendage to their parents and not thinking, living, breathing people of our community. I also just think that it really undermines the role that all adults in our community, but especially educators, play in children's development. It's cliche to say it takes a village, but I think this bill completely ignores the role that educators play. And, when you're sick, you go to the doctor. When your car breaks down, you go to a mechanic. Educators are there to educate, and I think we need to respect that.